Hi, and welcome back to Gaffy's Grinds. In the previous video, we learned about a liquid inside animals called blood. And blood is a liquid or a fluid which carries or transports materials around the body. Now, in order for the blood to be able to transport substances around the body, it is pumped by the heart, and then it must flow around inside tubes around the body. And these tubes have a special name. We call them blood vessels. So blood vessels are tubes that the blood flows in. Blood vessels. Now, there are three main types of blood vessel, and each blood vessel is adapted for a different job. So each blood vessel, the three types aren't exactly the same, and that's because they have a slightly different job. The first type of blood vessel is called an artery. A-R-T-E-R-Y, artery. So this is the first type of blood vessel. So we're going to take a closer look now at arteries. Here I am going to draw an artery. I'm going to draw two views of it. I'm going to draw one as if we're looking at the side on. Okay, and here you will see that I'm drawing an artery with very thick muscle walls. Okay, I'm drawing very thick muscle walls, and I'm going to shade in the walls with like little lines to show that this is muscle tissue. It's made of these layers of fibers. Okay, there's muscle on the top, and then there's muscle on the bottom. And in the middle is the space where the blood flows through. So in here, the blood flows through here. Like that. Now, I'm also going to draw a second view of the heart of an artery. I'm going to draw as if we're cut it down the middle, and we're looking down the center of it, if you like. So imagine for a second that we took a knife and we cut it down like that, and then we looked in from here. That's what we'd be looking at when we look in here like this. So I'm just going to get rid of those lines, and I'm going to continue drawing this view of an artery. Here, and then here, and all of this area here is muscle tissue. So these circles are like the different layers of muscle. Okay. All right. Now, so it's very important to note that the arteries have a very thick layer of muscle on the wall. Okay. So thick muscle wall, sorry, is what we're labeling here. So this here shows a thick muscle wall. And the reason why the muscle wall has to be so thick here is because arteries carry blood away from the heart. So the heart here is basically pumping the blood, pumps the blood, and then that means that the blood flows into the arteries under high pressure. So it's just been pumped, it's got lots of pressure, and it's pushing against the walls of the artery. So if the walls were very thin in an artery, that would probably mean they would not be able to withstand the pressure and they might burst. So the thick layer of muscle and elastic fibers allow them to withstand that high pressure. And it also allows them to stretch a little bit every time the heart pumps blood into them. Now, as a result of this thick muscle wall, it means that the space in the middle where the blood actually flows, so this little gap here, the space in here is actually quite narrow because most of the artery is taken up with the muscle wall. Now, this special area in here where the blood flows here, and it can also be seen here, this kind of tube or area where the blood flows is called a lumen. L-U-M-E-N. Lumen just means kind of gap, and it's the gap where the blood is able to flow. And we say that these arteries have a small lumen. And that's because most of the blood vessel itself is taken up by the muscle wall. Arteries have a small lumen and they have a thick muscle wall. The blood is under high pressure. High pressure. And that's why the walls need to be thick. Okay, high. Sorry, maybe I should not put that arrow in there. High pressure. All right, at this stage, what I would like you guys to do is I would like you guys to take a good look at that diagram with the labels. Take out your notes copy now. I would like you now to try from memory to draw and label artery in the two views I've shown you. Do that now, please. Okay, so before I put back up the picture, I'm going to give you a clue for anyone who's struggling. You want to be labeling the muscle wall. Is it thick? Is it thin? Describe it, label it, point at it. You should have included the lumen and described it. Lumen, L-U-M-E-N. Where is that? And describe it. And you should have showed the direction of the blood flow and where it's coming from. And you should have said whether it's got blood under high pressure or low pressure. Pause the video and finish that now. Okay, so this is what you should have had. This is our artery with thick muscle walls and small lumen. And blood is coming from the heart, away from the heart. So blood is being carried away from the heart and it's under high pressure. The second type of blood vessel that we're going to talk about called veins. Veins are slightly different from arteries. They look different. And again, just like we did before, we're going to draw them once this screen starts bouncing about. Sorry. We're going to draw a vein next. Okay. All right. So here I'm going to draw a vein again from two views. So here I'm drawing the muscle wall of the vein. The muscle wall this time is much thinner. So you'll notice that that layer is much thinner. And I'm leaving a big gap for the blood to flow. And again, I've got a thin muscle wall. So here I'm again going to put in the fibers to show that this is muscle. So this is all part of being muscle. You've got fibers, so they're stretchy fibers. It's what muscle is made of, stretchy cells, or stretchy tissue like that. Okay, and that there is a thin muscle wall is how I would describe that. I'm again going to draw the other view as well. So underneath here, down below, I am drawing the other view of a vein. And this time again, the wall is much thinner and the space for blood to flow is much bigger. Again, I'm going to use my narrower pen to draw the muscle fibers, stretchy elastic fibers. And we're now going to label. Maybe I'll do it in red. No, I won't do it in red. Sorry, maybe I'll do it in green. So this here represents the muscle wall. But instead of being a thick muscle wall, we'll describe it as a thin muscle wall or thin muscle layer. Layer or wall, same thing, doesn't really matter. So thin muscle layer, okay? Now, the reason why it can be a thin muscle layer is because the blood flows through the middle, but this time it's not under high pressure, okay? Now, this links back to where it's coming to and from. If I go back to my arteries again, arteries are flowing from the heart and they go to, the blood is flowing to the organs of the body. So from the heart, and then it goes round to the brain, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, the stomach. So it goes to the organs, that's the direction. Whereas in veins, it's going the opposite way. It's flowing from the organs, it's going through veins back to the heart. And it's under low pressure. And the reason for this is because it was pumped a long time ago. It's the pumping of the blood by the heart that creates the high pressure. So when blood leaves the heart, it leaves in arteries. It then travels down through the body. And once it gets down to the extremities, the hands, the feet, it then needs to come back up your legs, back up your arms, and it's not under high pressure anymore. It hasn't just been pumped. It was pumped a few minutes ago. So, or maybe not a few minutes, but a few seconds ago, 10, 15 seconds. It doesn't have that pressure anymore. So it's under low pressure now, and it doesn't, these walls don't need to be as thick in order to withstand the pressure. Okay. Now, another feature that we see here is we see that the space for blood to flow is much thinner. So that we learned is called the lumen. Sorry, spell it, get my writing a bit neater. Lumen, L-U-M-E-N. And this is a large lumen or a big lumen. Okay, it's a much bigger lumen than over here if we compare them. Okay, so there's a small lumen, this is a large lumen. Again, you shouldn't be watching, you're just listening so far. There is a problem. And that is because the blood is under low pressure here, that sometimes it doesn't keep going the right way. Here it's been pumped and pump very quickly this way. All right, it's only got one option. It's going to keep flowing this way. Now, in your veins, if you think about it, especially if you're a person who's standing up, your veins are trying to bring blood back up your legs or back up your arms towards your heart. So picture yourself standing up. Your arteries bring blood away from your heart, down your arms and down your legs. Now, just picture yourself a person standing up. The blood gets down to your feet, and then it's got to go up back to your heart. So think about what blood has to do to get back to your heart. It has to fight gravity. So it's trying to go upwards, up towards your heart. It's got to go up against gravity that's trying to pull it down. So without the pressure keeping pushing the blood along, there's a risk that it can accidentally turn and go backwards. Now, that wouldn't really be a good thing, because then all the blood would pool down in your feet, and all the blood would pool down in your hands and wouldn't get back to your heart and go back around again. So veins need to have some kind of structure or adaptation which stops this from happening. Okay, so we have to have some kind of structure adaptation to prevent that from happening. And it looks like this. So these special flaps of like tissue every so often inside the vein that let the blood flow through in that direction, but don't let it flow back. We call these structures valves. And you've probably heard of a valve before in a machine, and this means the exact same thing as it means there. Okay, valves are basically devices that let liquids only flow in one direction. So this is a valve. Now, of course, we could also see it in this view here like that. Like little flaps of skin or little flaps of tissue that let blood only pass through in one way. They don't let it go backwards. So their job is to prevent what we would call the backflow of blood. So they stop blood from flowing backwards. All right, so a quick recap of veins before we get you guys to draw it. First of all, they have a narrow or thin muscle wall. Okay, so thin muscle wall, that's because the blood's under low pressure. They have a wide lumen, a wide space for blood to flow, or a big lumen, a large lumen. So the gap where blood flows is much larger, and they have valves inside to stop blood from flowing backwards. The direction of flow is that blood is going from the organs, so the legs, the arms, the liver, the kidneys, the brain, back towards the heart. And the blood is under low pressure. It hasn't been pumped anytime recently. It's lost that pressure it had just after it left the heart. So blood's under low pressure, and that's why it needs valves to keep it going in the right direction, stop it going back down towards your legs or back down towards your arms. So that there is veins. And what I would like you to do is I would like you to take a good look, take out your notes copy, and beside where we did exactly the same way as I've done here, side by side with arteries, I want you to now draw and label veins as best that you can. Okay. All right. So again, before you play on, maybe I can give you some hints that can try and maybe help you remember what you need to include in your labels. I want you to check your diagram. Have you labeled the wall, and have you described the wall? What's it made of? And describe it. Have you labeled the lumen? Describe the lumen. Have you added in the valves and labeled the valves? Lastly, have you said how the blood flows? Where is it going from and where is it going to when it's in veins? And is it high or low pressure? Okay. All right, let's have a look. All right, so again, just to point out, we have thin muscle layers or thin muscle walls, a large lumen, valves, which job is to prevent backflow. So you can write that in if you like. Valves, they prevent backflow, prevent blood going backwards. And the direction of flow is from organs back to the heart. So organs on the left, flowing towards the heart on the right here. Blood's under low pressure, hasn't been pumped, moving slowly, and it needs the valves to keep it going in one direction. Now, there's one more type of blood vessel. These are the two main ones, arteries and veins, but they're actually not the most important one. The most important one is the third type of blood vessels, and they're called capillaries. Capillaries. Okay, so I want you to think carefully about that word because it's one that students forget. They think that there's only arteries and veins, but capillaries are actually the most important. Remember what the whole point of this is. The big picture is that blood is moving around the body to carry substances from where they're collected, like oxygen at the lungs or glucose at the digestive system. It's got to bring them around to all the cells for respiration. We covered that idea in the last lesson when we talked about blood. That's the purpose of the blood, to get oxygen to cells and to get glucose to cells and to get waste away from cells. Now, we've talked about blood moving in the arteries and the veins, but we haven't talked about them delivering and dropping off their materials. And that's because that doesn't really happen in arteries and veins. That happens in capillaries. Why are capillaries special? I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to draw a capillary. I'm actually going to change that. I'm going to draw it much thinner than that. I'm going to pick my thinnest line. Capillaries are very, very tiny blood vessels. So tiny that only one cell at a time, one red blood cell at a time, can fit through them. So you can't fit them in side by side, if you get what I mean. They're just wide enough for one red blood cell to flow through. Now remember, what material or substance are the red blood cells carrying? You should know that. Think about that. Speak your answer to the screen on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so red blood cells are carrying oxygen, and they need to deliver that oxygen to the cells. Now, when the blood's flowing along in veins and arteries, the oxygen can't pass to the cells because the walls are too thick. But in a capillary, the walls are extremely thin, and the oxygen that the red blood cells are carrying is able to diffuse out of the red blood cell. So O2 diffuses, which means it spreads. So it leaves the red blood cell and it goes into the cells that are outside, in the tissues outside the capillaries. So every organ in the body where there's loads of cells that are waiting for oxygen has loads of little capillaries that flow through them. And the capillaries allow the red blood cells to flow past really close to the red blood cells, and the oxygen and the glucose are able to diffuse. So oxygen diffuses and glucose diffuses. Glucose also. Oh, damn. Glucose diffuses. Okay, so the materials that the blood is carrying is able to diffuse. So the oxygen diffuses out of the red blood cells and the glucose diffuses out of the plasma of the blood. And then it can be delivered to the cells where the capillaries pass. So that's a very, very important idea. Okay, so this is capillaries. These are what allow the blood to actually do their job. So they're specially adapted because their walls are only one cell thick. So very, very thin, only one cell thick. So if they were any thicker than this, the materials wouldn't be able to get out. The oxygen, the glucose would not be able to diffuse, and then blood would be pretty useless. So they have to be really, really thin. This also makes them very easy to burst. Okay, so capillaries burst all the time. This is generally what happens when we get a bruise. You burst quite a lot of capillaries and blood kind of leaks out of your capillaries. Where do capillaries fit into the big picture? Capillaries, really, really important. Remember, they let the blood do its job. They let the blood deliver the materials to the tissues that contain in the cells. Okay, so where do they fit in here? Well, if the answer is they fit in, they connect arteries to veins. So as blood vessels travel down your leg, for example, or down your arm, they will travel together. Fairly close together. There will be an artery bringing blood down your arm, and there will be a vein bringing blood back up your arm. And in between them are these little connections. So in between them are networks of capillaries like this, where again the red blood cells flow one at a time from arteries across to veins. And as they do so, the material, the plasma, the materials from the plasma, the glucose, and the material from the red blood cell, the oxygen, escape into the cells. So oxygen from the red blood cells and glucose from the plasma escape to the tissues that surround the artery and the veins. So the name of this here is a capillary. This here is a capillary, and it's a very, very important blood vessel. I don't know why, but it's always the one that seems the most difficult for students to remember, even though it's the most important one. All right, so what I'm going to get you guys to do is I'm going to take a good look at the diagram. What have I done there? And I am going to get you guys now to draw that from memory. Somewhere on the page, it might be a good, there you go, that's what you should have. Somewhere on the page, it might be a good idea to make a note of what I've done up here. Have a quick sketch map of the three types of blood vessels: arteries, veins, and capillaries. And you may want to draw that up close as a little diagram for capillaries as well. Sorry, it's jumping all over the place on me. Excellent. All right. Now, what I want you to do now is I want you to put away all your notes, take out your practice copy, and we are going to do this again. So from memory, what I want you to do now is, from memory, I want you to practice drawing out this diagram and labeling all the parts completely from memory. So I don't want you to look at your notes whatsoever. So pause the video and do question 18 now. Draw the following diagrams and label each part. Okay, hopefully you had no problem with that. First of all, what are they? This here is obviously our artery. This here is our vein. And this here is our capillary. All right. Here, the blue box here is a certain muscle layer. Well, that to me looks like a thick muscle layer. So that's what you should have said, thick. And then this one here looks like a thin muscle layer. So that's the difference between arteries and veins. Another difference between arteries and veins is I see the orange box here is pointing at valves inside the vein. So this is a valve. Okay, so veins have valves, so two V's. So you might remember that. I don't really like those gimmicky tricks. I like to prefer to remember, well, what's the job of them? The vein carries blood under low pressure, doesn't have any blood, anything pumping it, so it needs valves to stop it going backwards. Artery's job is to carry blood that's under high pressure, needs the thick muscle wall and no valves to stop the blood, because it'll just keep going one way anyway. The green box here shows the lumen. Okay, so this here would be a large lumen for a vein, large lumen. And this here is a small lumen. Right, that's it. That's all your boxes filled in and all your labels done. And you are ready to go and answer the next set of questions here. All right, guys, so to finish it off with some practice, I'm going to get you guys to practice question 19 down to 28. It's pretty, the most of them are pretty straightforward, I think. Yeah, pretty sure all of those are pretty straightforward. So that's it, guys. If you found today's video useful, you learned a lot from it, I would appreciate if you could leave the video a like, because this helps other students who aren't in our school to find this video. Other students that may not have access to help when they're trying to revise, it can help them to find it. And the more students I can help, the better, because that's what the videos are for. All right, guys, thank you. Appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.